Under the golden African sun, the town of Ndlovu buzzed with life. The air was thick with the scent of grilled maize, spices, and fresh fruit, while the chatter of merchants and the laughter of children filled the streets. In the middle of this lively chaos, a young couple walked hand in hand, their fingers intertwined, as if nothing in the world could pull them apart. Bokang and Zenzile were no strangers to struggle. Their clothes were worn but clean, their shoes dusty from the unpaved roads, yet their love shone brighter than any jewel in the marketplace. They had built their world on shared dreams and whispered promises, finding comfort in each other's presence despite the hardships they faced. Bokang, however, carried a hunger that love alone could not satisfy. His dark eyes were always searching for something bigger, something more. As they passed by the towering houses on the hill, where the wealthy lived behind high gates and guarded doors, his steps slowed. He imagined himself there, dressed in fine suits, drinking expensive wine, and driving sleek cars that left trails of dust in their wake. "I want more than this, Zenzile," he said, his voice thick with longing. "I don't want to spend my life just surviving." Zenzile, ever patient, squeezed his hand and smiled. "Love is the greatest wealth, Bokang. We will make a life together, and that is enough." But her words did not quench the fire inside him. While she found joy in the little things, the warmth of the sun on her skin, the taste of sweet coconut water on a hot day, the simple pleasure of sharing a meal, Bokang was restless. To him, love was beautiful, but not enough. He wanted power. He wanted to be known. He wanted to escape the dusty streets of Ndlovu and step into a life of luxury. As they walked past the market stalls, where women balanced baskets on their heads and men bargained over the price of yams, Bokang barely noticed the life around him. His heart beat for something far beyond what he had. He loved Zenzile, but deep down, a voice whispered to him, "There is more out there, and you deserve it." Zenzile, unaware of the storm brewing in Bokang's soul, held his hand tightly. She believed their love was strong enough to withstand anything, but sometimes even the deepest love cannot stop a heart that longs to chase the world. Bokang sat on an old wooden crate outside their small home, staring at the night sky. The stars above twinkled like diamonds, each one reminding him of the riches he longed for but did not have. The air was cool, carrying the distant sounds of music and laughter from a wealthy neighborhood on the other side of town. He clenched his fists, frustration bubbling inside him like a fire he could not put out. "Zenzile," he said, his voice filled with longing. "I don't want to live like this forever. I'm tired of struggling. I want more than just enough food to eat. I want wealth. I want power. I want a life where I don't have to worry about tomorrow." Zenzile, who was sitting beside him, gently placed her hand over his. Her touch was soft, warm, comforting, like a steady flame in the middle of a storm. She looked at him with love in her eyes, the same love that had kept them going through every hardship. "Bokang," she said with a smile, "love is the greatest wealth of all. We have each other, and together we will build a good life." But her words did not ease the hunger in his soul. Bokang pulled his hand away, shaking his head. "Love does not buy a house, Zenzile. Love does not fill an empty stomach. Look at those rich men in their fine suits, driving their big cars. They don't worry about struggling. They live like kings. And I am tired of being poor." Zenzile sighed, sadness flickering in her eyes, but she did not argue. She knew Bokang's heart was restless, always dreaming of something bigger, something more. He loved her, but his love for wealth was growing stronger, like a shadow creeping between them. As the wind blew through the quiet streets, Bokang made a silent promise to himself. "One day, I will be rich, no matter what it takes." What he didn't know was that his hunger for wealth would soon lead him down a path that love could never bring him back from. Zenzile's love for Bokang was as deep as the ocean and as steady as the rising sun. She saw his hunger for success, his endless dreams of wealth, and she never tried to stop him. Instead, she stood beside him, believing in him more than he believed in himself. No matter how hard life got, she never complained. She worked long hours, saving every coin, hoping to help Bokang build the future he wanted. When Bokang spoke of his dreams, Zenzile listened with bright eyes, nodding, encouraging him. "You will make it, my love," she would say, her voice full of warmth. She used her small earnings to buy supplies, helping him start a tiny business selling handcrafted goods in the market. She woke up before the sun, weaving baskets and sewing clothes to add to his stall, determined to see him succeed. She believed that love and hard work would be enough to carry them forward. But no matter how much she gave, it was never enough for Bokang. He wanted more money, more power, more than the simple life they had. Every night as they sat in their tiny home, she would tell him, "We are building something together, Bokang. We will grow, step by step." But Bokang only sighed, staring out the window, his heart elsewhere. Zenzil loved him with every part of her soul, but she could feel the distance growing between them. She was ready to fight for their love, to sacrifice everything for their future. But deep inside, she feared that no matter what she did, Bokang's hunger for wealth would always be stronger than his love for her. The evening air in Ndlovu was thick with the scent of grilled meat, ripe mangoes, and the dust kicked up by the day's movement. The marketplace, usually loud with the voices of merchants and the laughter of children, suddenly grew quiet as a deep, unfamiliar hum echoed through the streets. A car, sleek, black and more expensive than anything the town had ever seen, glided smoothly over the rough road. It moved like a shadow, silent and powerful, its polished surface reflecting the golden sunset. People turned their heads, frozen in place. Men stopped mid-conversation, women clutched their baskets tighter, and children peeked curiously from behind wooden stalls. The entire town seemed to hold its breath. Then, the door of the car opened. From inside stepped a woman unlike any Ndlovu had known. She moved with the grace of royalty, her long silk dress flowing like water with every step. Gold bracelets clinked softly against her wrists, and the diamond earrings she wore caught the last rays of the sun, sending tiny sparks of light dancing across the marketplace. Her skin was smooth and radiant, and her heels, sharp and tall, made soft clicks against the dusty ground. The whispers began immediately. "Who is she?" one woman murmured. "She must be the daughter of a king," another replied in awe. "She smells rich," a man near Bokang whispered, his voice filled with both admiration and envy. Bokang barely heard them. He was frozen in place, his pulse quickening as his eyes locked onto the woman. He had seen beautiful women before, but never one like her. She wasn't just rich, she belonged to wealth. It was in the way she carried herself, the effortless confidence, the quiet power in her presence. She was everything he had ever dreamed of. Adama, that was her name. He heard someone say it, and it rolled off the tongue like a melody. Adama, daughter of a powerful businessman. A woman who lived in a world of luxury, where money was never a worry and struggle was nothing more than a distant memory. Bokang swallowed hard, his fingers tightening into fists at his sides. He had spent his whole life dreaming of a way out, longing for more than Ndlovu could offer. And now, standing right in front of him, was his golden opportunity. As Adama glanced around with mild interest, her expensive perfume lingering in the air, Bokang felt something shift inside him. He had loved Zenzil, yes, but love did not come with wealth, power, or a life beyond poverty. In that moment, he made a decision. He would do whatever it took to be part of Adama's world, no matter the cost. Zenzil had always believed in Bokang, standing by his side through every struggle. She had given him her love, her support, and her unwavering faith, but none of it was enough to stop what was coming. Adama had noticed Bokang. She had smiled at him, laughed at his jokes, and invited him into her world, a world of expensive cars, silk sheets, and glittering parties where the rich spoke in hushed voices about power and business. Bokang felt like he had stepped into a dream, one he never wanted to wake up from. He saw in Adama everything he had ever wanted: wealth, status, and freedom from the life he had always hated. Zenzil, however, felt the distance growing between them. Bokang no longer came home early. His hands, once rough from hard work, were now soft from days spent in luxury. He spoke less about their future together and more about the life he wanted for himself. Then, one evening, it happened. Zenzil found him outside their small home, his arms crossed, his face cold. There was no love in his eyes, no trace of the man she had once known. Her heart pounded as she stepped closer, afraid of the words she already knew were coming. "I'm leaving," Bokang said, his voice empty. "I don't want this life anymore." Zenzile's breath caught in her throat. "Leaving? Bokang, What do you mean? His jaw tightened. You have nothing to offer me, Zenzil. I deserve more. I deserve wealth. I deserve a life of riches. Tears filled her eyes as she reached for him, but he stepped back. Bokang, we were supposed to build our future together. Everything I have done was for us. But Bokang only shook his head. Love doesn't put food on the table. Love doesn't buy power. Adama can give me the life I deserve. The words cut through Zenzil like a knife. She had sacrificed so much for him, only to be thrown aside like she was nothing. She wanted to beg him to stay, to remind him of the love they had built, but she saw it in his face. He had already made his choice. With her heart shattered, Zenzil turned and walked away. She did not take anything with her, except the clothes on her back and the painful realization that the man she loved had abandoned her for gold and riches. Tears streamed down her face as she left Ndlovu, her dreams broken, her heart heavier than it had ever been. Bokang did not look back. He stood there, watching as the woman who had once been his everything disappeared into the distance. But he did not feel sadness. He felt victorious. He had made the right choice, or so he thought. The night air was cool, but Zenzil felt nothing. She walked slowly through the dimly lit streets of Ndlovu, her feet dragging as if every step was a battle. Her heart, once filled with love and dreams, now felt hollow. The pain of Bokang's betrayal clung to her like a shadow, refusing to leave. She reached the bus station, an old rusting shelter with wooden benches that had seen better days. The only light came from a flickering street lamp, casting long, lonely shadows across the ground. A few travellers sat on the benches, their faces weary, their belongings clutched tightly. No one spoke. The distant hum of crickets and the occasional cough were the only sounds filling the silence. Zenzil gripped the handle of her small, tattered bag. Inside, she had packed only a few clothes, a scarf her mother had given her, and a handful of coins, her last savings. Everything else, including the life she had once dreamed of with Bokang, was left behind. The bus to Maziwa rumbled as the driver climbed inside, checking his watch impatiently. The city was miles away, a place she had never been, filled with people she had never met. But what choice did she have? There was nothing left for her in Ndlovu. Taking a deep breath, she stepped onto the bus, her hands trembling. The moment she crossed that threshold, she knew she would never be the same. The driver barely acknowledged her as he took her money, counting it carelessly before gesturing for her to find a seat. She walked to the back and sat by the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass, her body drained of strength. The bus jerked forward, rolling away from the only home she had ever known. As the tires crunched against the dirt road, she watched Ndlovu shrink in the distance. The small market where she had laughed with Bokang, the dusty streets where they had walked barefoot, the tiny house they had once shared, it all faded into the darkness. Bokang was not there to stop her. He did not run after her, did not call her name. He had made his choice, and she was no longer part of it. Tears blurred her vision, but she did not wipe them away. Instead, she let them fall, one after another, soaking into the fabric of her dress. She cried not just for what she had lost, but for the woman she used to be, the woman who had believed love was enough. As the cold wind brushed against her skin, she wrapped her arms around herself, closing her eyes. The pain was unbearable now, but she whispered softly to herself, "One day, I will not feel this hurt. One day, I will not be broken. One day, I will rise." And with that, she let the darkness take her, as the bus carried her far away from the life she once knew. Bokang had stepped into a new life, a life he had always dreamed of but never thought possible. After marrying Adama, everything changed overnight. The small, dusty streets of Ndlovu were now a distant memory, replaced by towering mansions, sleek cars, and glittering parties. He was no longer just another struggling man in a poor town. He was now the husband of a powerful businessman's daughter, a man of wealth and influence. His days began with luxury. He woke up in a bed so soft it felt like clouds, wrapped in silk sheets that cost more than his entire childhood home. Instead of fetching water from a well, maids brought him freshly squeezed juice on a silver tray. Instead of eating plain porridge, he dined on exotic foods, prepared by top chefs. His clothes were no longer simple shirts and worn-out shoes. Now, he wore tailored suits made from the finest fabrics, his wrists adorned with gold watches that shimmered in the sunlight. Every night, he and Adama attended grand parties in breathtaking mansions, where chandeliers sparkled like diamonds and soft music played in the background. He walked through halls decorated with priceless art, sipping the finest champagne, shaking hands with politicians, businessmen, and celebrities. He laughed at their jokes, pretended to understand their conversations about stocks and investments, and let himself be swept into their world. Adama made sure he had everything he could ever want: cars that purred like lions, designer clothes, the best seats at exclusive events. He drove through the city in a sleek black car, windows tinted, moving past the struggling workers and street vendors he once stood among. Now, he was on the other side, the side he had always envied. But with all this wealth, something inside him had changed. He no longer thought about the life he had left behind, and Ndlovu was just a place in the past, a chapter he had closed without regret. And Zenzile, she was nothing more than a faint memory, a name he had erased from his heart. He had convinced himself that love was for the poor, that wealth was the only thing that truly mattered. As he sat on a balcony overlooking the city, the lights of skyscrapers stretching as far as the eye could see, he smirked to himself. He had made it. He had won. Or so he believed. When Zenzile arrived in Maziwa, she had nothing but a small bag, a broken heart, and the determination to survive. The city was loud, fast, and unfamiliar, but she refused to let fear consume her. She knew no one, had nowhere to stay, and no job waiting for her. But she had something far more valuable: her resilience. She found a tiny room in a crowded part of the city, barely big enough for a bed and a table. It was nothing compared to the life she had imagined with Bokang, but it was hers. Every morning, she woke up before the sun, determined to rebuild herself. She walked the streets, looking for work, knocking on doors, offering to clean, cook, or do anything that would earn her a few coins. One day, as she sat in her room, staring at the few pieces of jewelry she had brought with her from Ndlovu, an idea sparked in her mind. Back home, she had always enjoyed making bracelets and necklaces, crafting them from beads and stones she found in the market. What if she could sell them? With the little money she had, she bought a handful of colourful beads and wire from a local vendor. She sat for hours, working with her hands, creating delicate bracelets and necklaces, pouring her emotions into every piece. When she was done, she took them to the busy streets of Maziwa, setting up a small stand near the marketplace. At first, people walked past her without noticing, but Zenzile refused to give up. She smiled at every customer, telling them the meaning behind her jewelry, how each piece represented strength, love, and hope. Slowly, people began to stop. They admired her work, touched the beads, and listened to her stories. One by one, they started buying. Word spread about the young woman selling beautiful handmade jewelry with a story behind each design. Tourists, businesswomen, and even socialites started wearing her pieces. One day, a wealthy investor noticed her stand. He was impressed by her craftsmanship and the passion in her eyes. "Your work is unique," he told her. "With the right resources, you could turn this into something big." Zenzile couldn't believe it when he offered to invest in her business. With his help, she opened a small shop, then another. Her designs were featured in fashion magazines. Celebrities started wearing her pieces, and soon she wasn't just selling jewelry, she was creating a brand. Years passed, and Zenzile was no longer the heartbroken girl who had left Ndlovu with nothing. She was now the owner of one of the biggest fashion brands in Africa. Her name was known across the continent, her jewelry worn by the most powerful and influential people. But even with all her success, she never forgot where she came from. She never forgot the pain that had pushed her to become the woman she was today. Bokang had once told her she had nothing to offer. Now she had built an empire with her own hands, and she had done it without him. Bokang's perfect world crumbled before his eyes, and he was powerless to stop it. It all happened so fast. One day he was sipping champagne at an exclusive party, dressed in the finest silk suit, laughing with men who spoke of power and money. The next, the news broke. Adama's father's business empire had collapsed, drowning in debt and scandal. Everything that had once seemed untouchable was now gone in an instant. At first, Bokang refused to believe it. "This can't be real," he muttered, pacing through the mansion. But the reality hit hard when the bank sent notices, demanding payments he couldn't make. The luxurious cars in the driveway were taken one by one. The servants who once catered to his every need disappeared, leaving the house empty and cold. His designer clothes no longer felt like armor. They felt like costumes from a life that had never truly belonged to him. But the most painful betrayal came from Adama herself. One evening, as he sat in the grand living room, staring at the unpaid bills piling up on the marble table, she walked in with a calm expression. She was dressed as if nothing had changed, her jewelry sparkling under the chandelier's dim light. "Where are you going?" he asked, noticing the expensive suitcases by the door. She didn't hesitate. "Bokang, I can't live like this," she said smoothly. "I married you for a life of luxury, not for struggle. My father's wealth is gone, and I refuse to suffer." His heart pounded in his chest. "So you're just leaving, after everything?" She sighed, as if she were explaining something to a child. "Bokang, let's be honest. You were never truly rich. You were just a guest in this world. And now, the invitation is over." With those words, she walked out, stepping into a sleek black car that still belonged to someone else. He wanted to chase after her, to beg, to demand an explanation, but he knew there was no point. She had never loved him. She had only loved the wealth, just as he once had. His so-called friends vanished just as quickly. The men who had once clapped him on the back and invited him to exclusive clubs stopped answering his calls. The women who once admired him now laughed behind his back. Without money, without power, he was nothing to them. The final blow came when the bank took the mansion. Bokang watched as strangers carried out the expensive furniture he had once bragged about. The grand house that had once been filled with laughter and music now stood empty, its doors locked forever. With nowhere to go and no one to turn to, Bokang walked the streets of Maziwa, now unrecognizable from the man he had once been. His expensive shoes, now worn and dirty, dragged along the pavement as he passed by the same people he had once looked down upon. Whispers followed him everywhere. "Isn't that Bokang, the one who married into wealth? Look at him now, nothing but a beggar." He had chased riches, believing they would bring him happiness, but now he understood the cruel truth. He had given up love for a life of gold, but gold could melt, wealth could vanish, and when it did, he was left with nothing. Bokang had lost everything, his wealth, his so-called friends, and the luxurious life he had once flaunted. But in his mind, there was still one last hope: Adama. She had been his ticket to the world of riches, and if he could just talk to her, maybe, just maybe, she would take him back. With nothing but the clothes on his back, he made his way to the grand mansion where they had once lived together. His heart pounded as he stood outside the tall iron gates, staring at the massive house beyond. The security guard at the entrance barely glanced at him before turning him away. "Madame doesn't want to see you," the guard said, his voice cold. But Bokang refused to leave. He pushed past the gate, running up the long driveway, ignoring the shouts behind him. He had to see her. He had to remind her of everything they had shared. When he finally reached the front door, he banged on it desperately. A moment later, it swung open, and there she was. Adama, dressed in an elegant silk gown, her jewelry sparkling under the golden light of the chandelier. She looked just as stunning as ever, untouched by the chaos that had destroyed his life. For a second, relief flooded Bokang's heart. "Adama, please," he gasped. "I have nothing left. I need you." But before she could answer, another figure appeared beside her, a tall, well-dressed man, casually wrapping an arm around her waist. Bokang froze. His stomach twisted painfully as he realized what this meant. Adama smirked, her eyes filled with amusement. "Bokang," she said, tilting her head. "What are you doing here?" His voice cracked. I thought we had something real," she laughed, a sharp, heartless sound that cut through him like a knife. "Something real?" she repeated, shaking her head. "Oh, Bokang, you were just a toy, something to entertain me while life was good, but you were never truly rich. You were only borrowing a life that was never yours to keep." The man beside her chuckled, as if Bokang's misery was nothing more than a joke. Adama leaned into him, her expression full of mockery. "You didn't really think I would stay with a man who has nothing, did you?" Bokang felt the world spinning around him. His legs felt weak, his chest tight. He had given up everything for this woman. His love, his loyalty, even his dignity. And now she was tossing him aside like garbage. Tears burned in his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. He turned away, stumbling down the steps, each one heavier than the last. The sound of Adama's laughter followed him as he walked out of the mansion, out of her life, and into the cold, unforgiving night. For the first time, he truly understood. He had lost not just his wealth, but himself, and there was no one left to save him. Bokang walked into Ndlovu like a ghost from the past, but nothing about him resembled the man who had once left with his head held high. His expensive suits were gone, replaced by dusty, worn-out clothes that barely fit him. His once polished shoes had holes in them, and his confident stride had turned into a slow, tired walk. His eyes, once full of ambition, now carried the weight of failure and regret. As he passed through the town, the people noticed him immediately. Whispers spread like wildfire. Women at the market paused their bargaining to glance at him, their eyes filled with shock and curiosity. The men who had once admired him now shook their heads in quiet judgment. "That's Bokang," one of them muttered. "The one who left chasing riches." Another scoffed. "Look at him now, nothing but a beggar." Bokang kept walking, pretending not to hear, but every word stung. Once, he had dreamed of returning to Ndlovu as a rich and powerful man, proving to everyone that he had made it. Instead, he had come back with empty pockets and a heart full of regret. He made his way to the old marketplace, the very place where he and Zenzil used to walk together, hand in hand. He could almost hear her laughter in the wind, see the sparkle in her eyes as she spoke about their future. She had always believed in love and hard work, but he had been blinded by greed. He had traded her kindness for gold, only to realize too late that gold could vanish. But love, once lost, never returned the same way. His chest tightened as he sat under a large acacia tree, the same spot where he and Zenzil had once rested after long days of work. His fingers dug into the dry earth, frustration and pain boiling inside him. How had he been so foolish? How had he not seen that Zenzil was the real treasure? For the first time in his life, Bokang truly felt poor, not because he had no money, but because he had no one. He had chased after wealth, but now he was left with nothing but regret. He had traded love for riches, and in the end, both had abandoned him. A deep sigh escaped his lips as he closed his eyes, letting the sounds of Ndlovu surround him. He could start over, work hard, rebuild his life, but the one thing he wanted most, Zenzil's love, was gone forever. And that was a loss no amount of wealth could ever fix. The afternoon sun burned high over Ndlovu, casting long shadows over the marketplace. The air was thick with the scent of roasted maize and fresh spices, but the usual lively chatter of the townspeople faded as a luxury car rolled into the square. Its sleek black body gleamed under the sunlight, the tires moving smoothly over the dusty road, leaving behind a hush of admiration and curiosity. The townspeople watched in awe. Cars like this did not belong in Ndlovu. It was a vehicle of power, of wealth, something that seemed out of place in a town where people still bartered for bread and milk. The car came to a gentle stop, and for a moment, there was silence. Then, the door swung open. A woman stepped out. She was poised, graceful and radiant, her golden brown skin glowing in the afternoon light. She wore an elegant cream-colored dress that hugged her body perfectly, her jewelry subtle yet striking. Her hair, once braided with simplicity, now cascaded down her back in soft waves. There was a presence about her, something untouchable, something powerful. Zenzil. Gasps rippled through the crowd. People whispered her name, some with admiration, some with disbelief. The girl who had once sold handmade jewelry in the market had returned, but she was no longer the poor love-struck woman who had left Ndlovu in tears. She was transformed, a woman of success, a woman of power. Under the shade of an old acacia tree, Bokang had been sitting, his shoulders hunched, his mind lost in a storm of regrets. The moment he saw her, his breath caught. His heart pounded violently in his chest. For a moment, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. But no, it was real. Zenzil, the woman he had abandoned, the woman he had thought was unworthy of his dreams, the woman he had once broken, now standing before him, unshaken, untouchable. Something inside him shattered. He scrambled to his feet, his legs weak, his body trembling. His clothes were faded, his shoes worn down, his face unshaven and tired. He had lost everything, his wealth, his pride, his dignity, and now, as he stood before Zenzil, he realized he had also lost the one thing that had ever truly mattered. With a heavy thud, Bokang dropped to his knees in the middle of the street, his hands trembling as he reached out. His voice cracked, barely more than a whisper. "Zenzil, please, forgive me." His eyes, once so full of arrogance, now glistened with tears. "I was blind. I was a fool." His voice broke as he lowered his head, his hands clenching the dirt beneath him. "I had everything, but I threw it away." Zenzil stood still, looking down at him. The man who had once walked with such pride now knelt before her, broken and desperate. She should have felt victorious, triumphant, but she didn't. Instead, she felt nothing. Once, this moment had lived in her dreams. She'd imagined Bokang realizing his mistake, coming back to her, begging for forgiveness. But now that it was real, she saw the truth. She no longer needed his apology. She no longer needed him. She let out a slow breath and spoke, her voice calm and steady. "Bokang," she said, her words like a soft wind cutting through his pain. "I once cried for you. I begged for your love. I gave you my heart, and you crushed it without a second thought." She paused, letting the silence stretch between them. "But I have learned something. Real love does not beg, and I will never beg again." Bokang's lips trembled. He lifted his gaze, searching her face for something. Pity, warmth, hope. But there was none. Only peace. "Zenzil, please." His voice was almost childlike, full of desperation. "I have nothing left. I was a fool." Zenzil gave him a sad, knowing smile. "I wish you well, Bokang. Truly I do. But my life has moved on." She turned away, her heels clicking softly against the dusty road as she walked back to her car. The driver opened the door for her, and without hesitation, she stepped inside. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The engine hummed, and within seconds, the car pulled away, disappearing down the road. The dust swirled in the air, settling over Bokang like a final farewell. He remained on his knees, frozen, his body heavy with the weight of his choices. The whispers of the townspeople faded into the background, and all he could hear was the pounding of his own heart. He had lost her, not to another man, not to fate, but to time. And time, once gone, never gives second chances.